Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State. My name's Fred. I'm here with my good friend Scott Graham. We are in episode 30 of the Great Beer State podcast. Scott, great to see you again. Great to be here on this momentous episode. What's going on?
Well, it's fall in Michigan. Northern part of the state, we got some snow, so that's appropriate. I know in the southern part of the state, it is not snowy yet, but we're looking forward to the ski resorts getting opened up, and people can snowmobile, cross-country ski, and it's a little early to ice fish yet. But anyway, it's we're coming into the holiday season, and I'm thinking about that as I think about work and think about everything that's going on in general. We're still living in a COVID world, but we do have positive news on in the news. I guess they're distributing the Pfizer vaccine, which, as you mentioned before we started recording, is a Michigan-made product. So
That's right.
I guess have your Michigan beer. Wash down the vaccine shot with a Michigan beer. Maybe it's a double whammy there.
We're the great beer state and we're the great vaccine state. So get yourself ready. So
yeah, but it is really great news in that we can start to think about moving toward a more normal situation. I hope it gives me optimism. I think it's really a great thing.
Yeah, it'll take some time to move through, but I feel like, especially as, whatever you call it, as the numbers mounted, as it became such a significant thing, which has been several months now, there was no sense that we could return to big gatherings and beer festivals and community the way we knew it without a vaccine. So it just, even though we may not know when, we may not know how, and there's going to be difficulties in front of it, it was a required element for normalcy to return to our communities in general, but especially our beer, brewing, and festival community. So it is a massive milestone, and excited about it. So with that said, the broken record we talk about every week is we still are facing winter and the challenges of indoor dining and indoor drinking, which goes right along with it. So I don't know that a whole lot has changed there, other than that we're starting to be in mid-December, and we don't really know what the regulations and shutdown is going to look like for the rest of winter, but expect it to be complicated. There's a lot of innovative outdoor service happening out there from our brewery members and the other on-premise supporters of Michigan beer. So you got anything to add to that other than hold on tight and have a good pair of drinking gloves?
Well, I do hear stories of people getting together for an outdoor beer, and it's having real outdoor experiences. So I think some of that will continue. There might even be some people who do well with it. Geez, can you imagine if you had space to flood and maybe make an ice skating rink? I don't know. Hopefully we see some fun ideas.
Well, we got curling.
I'm not. Oh yeah. Yeah, curling could take on a whole new level of popularity.
Yeah, that's already happening up your way. So, and you think about it, we've been preparing people for this. We've been hosting a 6-hour beer festival in the dead of winter in February in a parking lot with bonfires for years. So we have the skills, we have the gear. Our community drinks outdoors every winter. So you're just going to need to put those skills to work, get your winter beer festival garb, and look at it as a mini beer festival every time you go drink outdoors. You
Yeah,
can do
that's a
it.
great way to look at it. I often tell people that, if you're going to live somewhere where it's a snowy winter, you have to find something to do outside so that you can look forward to it. Otherwise, you're going to wind up hating it. So, yeah, maybe outdoor drinking becomes a new kind of activity. Maybe it's even a sport. If golf is a sport, this can be too. Hey, no
Absolutely.
offense to those golfers out there. I didn't mean to take a dig at golf.
All right. Well, that seems like a good upbeat update, which is hard to do these days. So we'll take that and the encouragement to stay lively while you drink outdoors this winter, and we'll jump into this week's Brewers Dozen. So our weekly tradition of giving a shout out to roughly 13 breweries as we take our second lap through membership. This week we've got a group organized around sort of Southeast Grand Rapids. You want to kick us off and tell us anything about this grouping of the Brewers Dozen?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting listening to Kris and Jason Spaulding's interview, and so it fit in that we could just group logically around the area that Brewery Vivant and Broadleaf Local Beer are both in, which is part of the Grand Rapids community. Most of these breweries are in Grand Rapids, but it's kind of a southeast quadrant, maybe more or less. But I thought we'd start off with Brewery Vivant.
Yeah, excellent. And then their second location, which you'll hear about in the upcoming interview, is Broadleaf Local Beer in Kentwood.
And then picking up a couple downtown, we have Bob's Brewery. Of course, it's at the Bob, which is right downtown.
Yep. And then Grand Rapids Brewing Company, which is also downtown. But interesting, those two breweries, at least by name, are connected to John Svoboda, who was on just a couple episodes ago. Now, he was at the previous incarnation of Grand Rapids Brewing Company, which was a different company in a different location on 28th Street. But interesting little parallel there.
Yeah. Of course, in this general area, there's Founders Brewing Company.
And that is followed by East West Brewing.
Yeah, they're a really unique member. They've got a nice brewery there, and the east part is it's an Indian themed restaurant that's part of the operation called Bombay Cuisine. So, really unique member there. And not too far away is Elk Brewing, the Grand Rapids location.
And that's followed by Harmony Brewing Company.
Not too far away from Brass Ring Brewing Company.
And then we've got Thornapple Brewing Company.
And Jaden James Brewery, longtime member, kind of noted for their wine, but make some good beer there too.
Then we'll jog over to Dutton, where we've got Railtown Brewing Company.
Yeah, and skipping around kind of the outskirts of the southeast corner of Grand Rapids, we also have Gravel Bottom Craft Brewery and Supply, which is in Ada.
And then wrapping up this section, we've got New Union Brewery over in Lowell. So that is the Brewers
So
Dozen.
I encourage everybody to, get out to all those places. That's probably more than one afternoon, but you can go a couple times.
Yep. If they're serving outdoors, bundle up. If they're not, take it to go and reach out ahead of time and support those members as well as all the other members. So that'll take us to our interview this week. We talked to Kris and Jason Spaulding of Brewery, Vivant, and Broadleaf. Of course, Jason's history reaches back to being a co-founder of New Holland Brewing Company. So I worked with him for some years there, and go way back with him, as he and Brett were both around at the foundation of the guild as well. So it was a fun interview. We covered a lot of ground. They have a unique focus, I would say, in terms of their business structure and what they put forward, in that it's that they put their sustainability and their corporate values on equal footing with their beer and brewing and hospitality values. And I found that to be an interesting conversation and a little different than the rest. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. That's a very interesting part of their business, and being a husband and wife operations team, that's another fairly unique element. We don't always see that. There's certainly other examples of it, but I think that's a cool part of their operation. I really enjoyed listening to the interview. It made one of the things that Kris said. This isn't a major part of it, but it really got me thinking about something that I believe in, and is part of the long-term success of the industry. I really, I guess I muse over it more than I focus on it, because it's a little challenging. But um, making beer and local beer in your brewery part of everyday life and part of the fabric of society is something that I think is long-term really important to the industry. We're way past cool, although I think we're still a very cool industry with lots of cool, fun, welcoming people. One of the things I really want to see happen over time is local beer just become more and more of the fabric of day-to-day life. It's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of us, and I think that's an important part of the evolution. And it's certainly happening. It's a little hard to find ways to actively move this along, but I think it's a really fun and important part of how the industry continues to develop.
Yeah, and I think they have a lot of interesting perspective and ideas and suggestions and examples of what they've been through in terms of some of the community and culture development within their own employee base, within their team structure, and like they and they I think were brave to put some of those things out there in the way that they did when they did. And a lot of that's more present and popular and talked about now. When you think about when they were setting out and making that a priority, they had to do a lot of education, and it was probably came with a little risk. So you'll hear them talk about that, and just what we're even talking about. They explain about B Corp and that it was more than, I guess what I'm leading to and maybe setting up is that it was more than just saying we want to be about these things. They took a very pragmatic approach to ensuring that their organization was about those things. And I think there's a lot of encouraging and helpful stuff in their story. And it was fun to catch up with them. They're great contributors to the Michigan beer scene and to the greater Grand Rapids beer scene. So unless you got anything else to chip in, we can hand it off to the Spauldings and head over to East Grand Rapids.
I think it's time to get into the interview and quit talking about what you talked about.
Yeah. So here it is, Kris and Jason Spaulding from Grand Rapids, Brewery, Vivant, and Broadleaf Local Beer. Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast, Kris and Jason. It's great to see you guys.
Great to see you, Fred.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about your story and sharing it with people. And there's so much to talk about in this crazy year, but I love to start with just kind of hearing how you became part of the Michigan beer and brewing community. I know that's that involves both of you in different ways in terms of the history of your brewery ventures. So I don't know, Jason, whether you want to start with the New Holland adventure and when you and Kris cross paths in terms of that path, and maybe you guys just take it away and let me know kind of a little bit about your beer story.
Yeah, I mean, my obviously connection with New Holland starts way back in college, a whole college. Brett and I had been good friends for a long time. And, when you're a young college age kid, making beer for a living is just about the coolest thing you could ever think of. And
Yeah.
we used to really check out, Brett and I used to ski a lot, and we would go to Colorado and, of course, check out all the breweries there, cool beer scene. And there really wasn't much of one here in Michigan yet. It was, there's a few breweries, Bell's, I don't even know. I think they were like 6,000 barrels back then, really, really small if you think about it. But, not much of a presence for craft beer. So, the whole thought was, man, we could really get on the front wave of this craft beer thing since we were so enthusiastic about it. And then fast forward, we got New Holland open, and that was back in 96, 97. And I believe we had the 15th license, like whatever our license was 00015,
Yeah.
There weren't many breweries back then, which is kind of crazy. And then, I think things take a little longer to catch on in the Midwest in just a general sense, but, we could see things going out West, and it took a little while for it to kick in. But I mean, obviously, Michigan's got a good reputation for beer, and that's kind of how we got into it, kind of just being very enthusiastic young young men that love beer. And there was a trip to Europe that we took right out of college. We had a chance to play soccer, and that was a good exposure to what beer culture really was. And I think coming off of that trip, we're just so enthusiastic about beer, and being, 24, drank a lot of beer, and that was just our whole life. So
yeah, that's been a common theme too, in terms of talking to people who opened in the 90s, is a lot of times there was an inspiration from another community and another culture about, it wasn't just about a beer that I need to make this beverage. It was about, I traveled here, whether that's out West or to Europe. There's so many stories of brewery operators in that era coming back inspired about a community. I think that's interesting and compelling.
Well, I think if you think back then too, culinary wise and beer wise, the culture that America had around those things wasn't much to brag about. And Europeans would make fun of our beer and make fun of our food. I think it's come a long ways since then. Mm-hmm. But if you think back, those things were so new and fresh when you could see how important beer was to people in these little communities, and in the flavor exploration, all those things. You can see how it's inspirational. I think it's, that was back in the 90s. People have a different experience now. A lot of the young people that are starting breweries now there's just always been craft beer and other beers around. But back in those days, there really weren't many options. Like, you had to really seek out Heineken.
Yeah. You didn't just have to start a business. You had to sort of correct the marketplace, which is a daunting task. Kris, when did you kind of come into that? When did that come into your picture, your worldview, and what were your paths like in terms of watching New Holland come to be and connecting there?
Yeah, so I wasn't really a beer fan in college until I tried Bell's Amber, and that became like this base starting point for me, which I'm quite thankful that my neighbors were big fans of Bell's, because I feel like I was introduced to craft beer earlier than I may have been otherwise. So I grew up in Holland. When I moved back, I was so excited to find that there was a brewery in Holland. It was quite a surprise. So frequented New Holland for quite a few years. And then, at some point, I think I was there often enough that Jason just had to asked me out on a date. So, so that was how we met, really, was meeting there. And then, you know, me telling him that his beer wasn't as good as Bell's Amber, which, you know, like,
ouch, the sharpest knife.
Yep. I'm on the other side of the bar, and she's explaining how, you know, she's drinking our amber, and it's fine and it's good, but if I really want a good beer, I should really get a Bell's Amber. And but I remembered her name.
Yeah, which is
so
rare.
From
He
that
doesn't
point
remember
forward,
anyone's
so that it was.
Wow, that's tricky. I feel it's a little dangerous story for me, because in that year I was probably at Bell's. So I was like, you know, I'm on both sides of the story. It's a little dangerous territory.
Yep. But something that I think is cool too, you know, at that time I was working at a restaurant in Holland that the owner was trying to stay at the forefront of all of these trends. And our Christmas party that first year I had moved back was, we took a tour from Jason at New Holland. That was actually the first time we met, though we don't fully remember each other from that. But like, what a cool thing that, you know, I was introduced into the scene through some friends in college, and then the restaurant, you know, that I worked for saw the future of this craft industry and took the time to educate all of us about what is craft beer and what makes it different. And those are things that, you know, when you look back as far as what are your influences, she was pretty influential on me in terms of, you know, the importance of the education from the staff side, right? So making sure that your team understands the purpose of your business and why it matters and what makes it special. And those are things that, you know, I definitely took into Vivant as we open years later.
Yeah. So, and kind of working towards that, I feel like at times with this story and with both of you here, there's times where it's going to feel like the fast forward button gets pressed down, because I think to get to present day, we're going to have to move through a lot of stuff. But I think before we go there, I wonder if each of you have sort of a moment that you remember, or an idea that came to you. I think you were just talking about it a little bit, Kris, is like, when did this start to look like something bigger than, you know, a project or a kind of a crazy whim? And did you start to see the larger community and the larger, I don't know, the big picture stuff come to be? Is there a moment when beer shifted for you in those days?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, her and I, you know, our relationship started, you know, I really liked her because she liked beer, and that was step one. But, you know, that's been part of our relationship for a really long time. And then, you know, when I did leave New Holland, you know, the only thing I really talked about was getting back into the beer business, and pretty much Kris got so tired of me talking about getting back into it someday and what that would look like, that her and I just started, you know, putting a business plan together, and, you know, combining our collective thoughts on what we thought a business, how it should operate, what it should look like, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And it was kind of like, that was like the first mesh up of our ideals into something that, you know, became Brewery Vivant. But I think that whole process, you know, that was like a 5-year process. So we really flushed that out, and it, you know, the big sustainability and environmental parts of that weaved in into that as well. You know, a big part of what her passions are, and I think that's kind of where I think it started opening up. And also during that time, you know, this was like, you know, 2005, you know, between 2005 and 2010 when we opened, and, you know, craft beer had really accelerated during that time. You know, prior to that, 2005, I remember you'd have to like arm wrestle stores to even consider bringing in, you know, a pale ale, and you had to explain what pale ale was. And, you know, no one really wanted craft beer. They would tolerate it and put it on the shelf, but no one really like was after it. So, you know, during that period when we were setting it up, like the world of craft beer changed. But I think that, you know, that taking that time to come together on that, on the idea, I think that's kind of what drew both of us into that bigger picture and what it could be.
So, Kris, had you ever imagined a career in beer prior to those discussions? Tell us a little bit about your background and maybe how your long-term vision, when that uh, prism or perspective changed.
Yeah, that was never on the table for me. Not something I would have imagined me doing, the life I have right now. I've been more on the environmental sustainability realm, so working at nonprofits and then working in corporate America, but making products that were good and trying to make them better environmentally. So that was the road I always assumed I would have stayed on. But what's cool is, that you can take all those values that were so inherent in who I am and what I wanted to do in this world and apply them to any product, which is where Jason came in then, right? So you marry up his passion for the craft, which I enjoyed as well, just hadn't been part of my history outside of drinking. So marry up that passion with the passion for the values that are now, the foundation of our business. And that's how it came together. So, I always joke, I'm in it for the values and for showing what a business can be for a community. And it just happens to be that we make a really cool product, where he's definitely in it, I think, on the flip side, right, for the beer itself, but also enjoys the benefits of being a values-driven company. So, yeah, it still surprises me to this day that I own a brewery. I think it's not what I would have imagined, but it does make me a lot cooler, as I was always more of a nerd. So it's nice to
Nerds eventually have their day.
That's right.
Things just got to come together for the thing they're nerdy about to have its day. So yeah, I'd love to talk about sort of that approach to bringing your ideals together and creating Brewery Vivant. And I guess, could you describe what the vision was before your open and sort of what you had really kind of drawn up in the playbook briefly, and then what it was like to put that into the world and day one you're open and you've got people coming in and seeing that vision, and then it imagine it starts to morph. So what did you hope it was, and how did the public receive it?
Well, I think it's interesting from, Kris had mentioned like our two kind of focuses. Like on the product side, it was exciting because we were talking about kind of focusing in on a niche within a niche of craft beer. And our original vision, was to kind of play off these, countryside, Belgian, French countryside, Saison style beers. Farmhouse ales really, they're hard to define, but, these kind of rustic beers that tie in local agriculture. And we're really excited about that. And we had taken a trip over there and got to experience, firsthand trying these little tiny, breweries beer. And it was great. And it was very inspirational for putting our business together. So on a product side, that was really fun. I don't think that would have been possible in the 90s to focus on such a narrow niche. We've since, had to expand out of that a little bit, just given where the market is. But then also, when we're putting that together on the value side and environmental things that we're looking at, I was getting excited about how can we reduce our footprint and things like that. How can we recapture energy in all sorts of different ways? And then I think Kris really brought that experience from Herman Miller on the value side and how to structure that corporately. And I think that was actually really, something that I wouldn't have brought, it was just a great experience to bring into the fold. And, and that's really been, I think we're probably more known for our sustainability than even our beer. So that's really, Kris's influence.
And food, right?
Food.
And the other piece, right, is like at the time, everyone was doing the same kind of food for the most part. So doing more casual fine dining with craft beer. that was cool to come out with, and also something, that we took inspiration from on different trips that we had. But like, I like to think about, we put so much time, as Jason said, we worked on that business plan for like 5 years, and we had it like nailed down exactly what we wanted. And if I read that business plan now, for the most part, we are doing everything we intended to do, and we haven't changed course too much. The one thing we said we would never do is open a second location. And that's, a big part of what's different now, in that we open broadleaf, but that has its own story. But I feel like, in our 10 years, we actually have our 10 year this year, we've, for the most part, stuck to the plan and just added ripples to it versus, changing course in a big way. And it's been cool to see, right? Like, so when we opened, we were somewhere around the 2000th brewery in the States. And now, there's like 8,000, I don't even know. So though it was experiencing a good amount of growth in 2010, like, you look at how much growth has happened since then. And a lot of these things that we hold so dear to ourselves about, like the values in food and these styles of beers, we've also seen all of those things become more commonplace, which in a lot of ways is great, because that's what you want to see, is your industry evolve and you be a part of that evolution. So that's just been pretty cool to watch over the years.
And did you feel response to that right away? Both, I guess let's start with you, Kris, and sort of the very visible, front of mind statement of not only of values, but sustainability and data. And you really brought forward a lot of information as part of your brand messaging that wasn't come drink the beer. It was more than come drink the beer. What was the response like from the people coming in? Was that championed? Were you getting a lot of support? Was there a question? Was there both? How did it play, I guess, once you put it to people?
Yeah, I think like people were real receptive to the transparency, that we had, and to saying like, this is our intention, here's our goals, and reporting on that every year, I think has been, it's been beneficial in a lot of ways. So I'd say the reception to it was great. What I always am disappointed in is that like people are just so happy we're doing it, that we report on this stuff and we pay attention to it, that it's rare that anyone actually says, well, why aren't you doing this other thing? Right. So I think part of that is the bar is so low for what the expectation is around those kind of things, that any action is seen as awesome. And people mostly just stop there. But I'd like to see, what does 20 years from now look like? I think it'll be quite different, or even 10 years. I think these generations that are growing up now and that will be growing into our industry are going to have different expectations for what a business looks like and their engagement. And, it's not going to be enough to just donate gift cards to nonprofits, which I think almost every craft brewer does ad nauseum. Yeah. But I think doing, that next level will be an expectation, which will be, that'll be interesting to watch. Like, how does that all evolve over time?
There's an insight in Kris's brain. Never done. We can always do better.
That's right.
In the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you feel like there's been a shift in terms of the brewing community, either in Michigan or nationally, in terms of, has the needle also moved in terms of, has the bar risen for producers and operators in terms of, in order to be part of this move? Are people either inspired to do more and start their own sort of approach to putting these values and sustainability forward? Are you feeling that needle move and that the bar's raising?
Oh, for sure. I think that's happening a lot. I think, this year has been such a challenge with, for all of us financially, that I feel like COVID is going to push us back a little bit from the momentum that was there. Just because, you do need to be able to invest, whether it's time or money, into initiatives. But I think the expectation is higher than it had been, 10 years ago or more. Oh, I had some thought. Where did it go? Maybe you took it.
Maybe I took it. Yeah.
Well, it brings up a question for me, or maybe sort of a comment question, is that, I have my own sort of version of ideals that that are, mutual in a lot of ways and crossover in a lot of ways. So what you guys do with your sustainability report and your visibility and your messaging is so different than somebody saying, well, we try to use local ingredients as much as possible, or we try to be sustainable when we can. There are people that want to sort of join the messaging and say they're sustainable, but they're not actually measuring anything, and they may or may not be making significant changes in their operations. And so I think, I guess I wanted to both compliment you on it and then just say, do you have suggestions or comments on how to make more actionable change versus just talking points, or, like in the restaurant world, what's often described as greenwashing, of saying, well, yeah, we're using local agriculture, but if the practice isn't really there in the back of the house, then, where does it go? So I guess, what do you think about that issue, and how do you champion making the change?
I think a couple things go into that. I always suggest when I talk to other breweries who want to step up their game, like, find a goal or two or three that your team can get excited about, whether it's an environmental goal or a social equity goal, diversity, whatever, and see where, your invested staff are interested in putting some of their energy. And then you have a place to start, right? So you kind of get that baseline, like, yes, we're all fired up about whatever. You make a goal for whatever that may be, and you start working towards it. And then as you see successes, then it's, then you can easily add additional goals. I think the BA has done a nice job of putting a lot of resources together to help people identify where those opportunities are and where the benefits of engaging are, whether that's their, diversity initiatives that they are working on pretty, heavily, I think, these days, or the more environmentally focused ones. But even just participating in, like, the benchmarking that the BA does, right? So you look at your utility usage, which is really easy information to get, and you plug it in, and you can see exactly how you're performing compared to other breweries of your size or in your region. And just knowing that, right, being able to benchmark against someone will show you where, like, oh my gosh, we use so much more water than anyone else. Like, there's an easy goal that must have low-hanging fruit because you're so far off. So I think it's just, finding a couple key things and then taking advantage of the resources that everyone has put a lot of effort into at the, national level. And then I think the state guild is obviously also doing a lot of work on things like that too.
But organizationally, I mean, you have to have ownership or at least key management involved in driving that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's never gonna take. It'll come off. It'll go to the marketing department, as you said,
Right.
Going to greenwashing, but it won't really.
Or it
sink.
leaves with an employee.
Yeah. It won't sink into.
Yeah, so they had a great program, and then once the person who managed recycling left, so did the recycling.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so finding a way to make that institutional and structural and, collaborative, having buy-in, I think, is obviously important, because I think what you were saying, Jason, makes me think there's going to be weather in front of you. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be a reason why it's harder or more expensive or whatever, right? Because that's just the nature of it. If you're stretching to make change, there's going to be resistance and difficulty. So you're going to need some, backbone and some support structure to say, yes, we understand. Now let's work through it. Otherwise, it'll fold.
Yeah. Also, as owners, like, Kris puts that report out there, and we say, here's what our goals, here's how we did, and we put it out there to staff, and sometimes staff calls us to task on things, and sometimes it's hard to hear, but that's why we do it, and we usually are better for it because we put it out there, and ownership doesn't necessarily like to be criticized, but
No one does.
yeah, no one does. But
Yeah.
that's why we do it, and it makes us better. And we
So it's got to come with this willingness to look at a report card and find the opportunity versus whatever guilt or embarrassment.
For sure.
So Jason, can you talk about that on the production side in terms of, by accepting this as critical to the mission, as part of the mission, it's going to make some change in how you go about executing your goal. That did you find that, especially in the early days, that it sort of, that narrowing or that limitation created some inspiration and some opportunities to creatively problem solve with the parameters set of, well, we've got to do this with these other things in mind. How did you get maybe the brewing team behind that, and how did it affect how you brewed? Were there changes in either equipment or materials or waste?
Yeah, I think it really just started like with measuring and actually watching and being aware. We had to build a little bit of a baseline in the early days, and then we try to improve on that. But just having that baseline there gives us something to compare to. And then we started looking at different opportunities. Like in the business plan, I had written up, dreams of different things we could do that, and ends up not maybe being applicable to the way a small brewery operates, like capturing your steam to generate hot water. And yeah, it sounds great. But when you're only brewing you're not brewing 24 hours a day around the clock, those work great for bigger breweries, but they're not really applicable to smaller breweries. So, kind of finding what opportunities are there. But the most impactful stuff we have is all boring. It's not like something that a piece of equipment we bought. It's actually, noticing how we wash stuff, noticing things and measuring those things, and making, the staff aware that we could do better. But, there are things like the centrifuge that we bought. We spent more money in that centrifuge than we spent on our brew house. But when we looked at everything, we were using a large pad filter, and we're looking at the time it took our brewers to do it, how much water we'd use, and we looked at all the factors. It was a way to justify that expense, and that's changed the way we've done things, and we could see how much water we're saving and cutting back on the time it took. Like we would, if we had to filter a stout, it could take 2 days of a brewer's time in a pad filter. So just that alone, there's an economic side and an environmental side, and those are the types of things that we try to look for and go forth with. And then, having a little bit of a reputation for trying things out and having a willingness to do that, we kind of went down a path for like CO2 recapture, and we have like a pilot system basically installed, but it's not quite live yet. But just being aware of those opportunities and finding ways to take advantage of those, I think it just kind of, once we set that reputation, start doing them, people start approaching us on those things, and it's kind of fun.
That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really cool stuff we were supposed to do in April, and then instead, the pandemic hits.
Yeah.
We knew we wouldn't have the production that we needed in order to make this cool innovation work. So, like,
Yeah.
All the collab beers we'd lined up.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
2020 had other ideas.
Sure did.
Well, at least you're no stranger to adversity and creative problem solving. That's I'm sure was relied upon heavily in those months. So before jumping into broadleaf and heading into the last call questions, you guys put really forward out there, and I think you've already been talking about it. But I would love to hear listeners to hear what your take is on the B Corp, and what is that about, and what makes it up, and what should people know about it?
Yeah, that my favorite thing. So B Corporation certification is really just like a third party that comes in and validates that you're actually walking the walk, not just talking the talk, as it relates to your whole operation. So in contrast, right, we have a LEED certified building, which is looking at that building and everything that went into making it. So there's a certification very specific to an object, where B Corp looks at how you run things and how you treat all of your stakeholders. So your employees, your investors, customers / your product, suppliers, and your community. So my favorite thing about it is the certification process. The first step is you do an assessment, which takes quite a while to gather all the information, but it's such a good tool. In, the nerdy part of me that likes my report cards, right? You can go in and answer all these questions. There's somewhere around 200 about your whole company, and you can see, just through answering the questions and seeing what the questions are, it really helps to shine a light on, how could we be a better business that is more beneficial to, the greater community and not just to the investment side of a company. So really shines a light on opportunities to improve. And then, you go through the assessment and you can decide from that point on, do you have enough points to pursue certification or not? It is not an easy thing to get. I think the average number of points that, if any random company went in, it would be like 30 or something like that. And you have to have 80 to be officially certified. So it's a very high bar, but it's great. Like you have to recertify every few years, which I also like, because it keeps holding you accountable to sticking with these values. I think it'll be really interesting for us to go through it. We have to recertify in September next year. And we've definitely during this year have had to peel back a lot of the cool things that we were doing, whether, community or staff or whatever. So it'll be an eye-opening experience to have recertification post-pandemic. But anyway, it's a great tool. It's a good way to show that you are truly living your values, but also to, see what those opportunities are. And then you're part of this network of other certified companies, which is, I think, the other main benefit. So there's not a lot of breweries in this region that are certified, but there's a lot of different companies. And we do, get to know each other pretty well. And if I have, a challenge that we're working through, and I want to get a perspective of someone who is also values driven, there's all these people I can call and say, we have this personnel issue or this financial issue. What would you do and how would you handle it? And it becomes a really good sounding board for someone that understands when you're driven by more than just the financial gain. So it's super helpful.
The what?
So tell me about Broadleaf. The location you said you'd never open is open. How did that come to be, and what's it all about?
Well, that was, driven by a few things. Like at Vivant, our distribution grew to the point where we just needed a place to store, whether it was like dry goods, cans, packaging. That footprint's so small at Vivant that we ended up renting space, a few different areas, in our wood barrel program and things like that. We just need a lot of space. So we were renting, and then we always thought, man, if we could get our own warehouse, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. We save some money. And so we kind of went down that path. And then the buildings in Grand Rapids, like warehouse buildings, are few and far between. Most have been developed into something else. And at the very least, they're very expensive. So we ended up kind of pushing a little further out than we wanted, still considered Grand Rapids, but technically Kentwood. And the building we ended up finding is in a retail area, and you're actually required to have some sort of commercial business in there. You can't just use it as a warehouse. So we're kind of presented this opportunity, given the needs that we have for warehouse, but also, this opportunity to create a tasting room. And then you kind of dovetail that with, the pressure that, we're feeling as craft beer has developed. We kind of started down this path of, these European style beers, kind of, heavily influenced with these, Southern Belgium beers, but those aren't the beers that people are lining up for or talking about. We have our core group of people that are excited and love those beers and something we're passionate about, but, hazy IPAs, pastry stouts, all these types of beers that really didn't fit our Vivant, the essence of what we were trying to do here. But we're still recognizing that those are valid beers. And I'm actually, personally, interested on, getting different flavors from hops and things like that. Here's a whole slice of brewing that I have to relearn now, and that's kind of exciting. So creating that second identity broadly kind of gives us an opportunity to still make those beers, experiment, but keep our Vivant brand intact and still feel genuine. But it gives us an opportunity to, create those beers, and then we can bring them to the other locations, and people that are looking for that have an opportunity, and we can kind of build that under that banner, and it's worked out pretty well. Again,
get with that pandemic.
Yeah, we were just starting to get people to know we were there at the new spot, and we're probably gonna have to start over.
Yeah, we gotta start over.
So.
Oh boy. Well, it sounds too like, if I'm understanding correctly and paraphrasing just for understanding that, so you didn't have to you didn't have to go back to like full business plan in terms of corporate structure. You are creating a sort of a branded location with purpose within the existing structure. So you're talking about messaging and function and what should it do and how does it align, but it is a venture of the original business structure.
Yeah, what's interesting is the company is called One Beer at a Time. Is technically that's the company we formed before we knew, what we were going to name our brewery, where it was going to be, anything like that. And the idea with our business plan, we'd change the world one beer at a time was kind of the thought. But so that entity now has, now fast forward to now, we have, the Vivant brand under that, and then we have this broadleaf brand, but they're both values under that one beer at a time umbrella. So there's a lot of commonalities, and we'll see how this develops and where it goes, but yeah, there's a lot of structural things that are the same. It's just a different focus on the style and the execution of those beers and food and things, but the service is similar, and
Yeah.
That's like a family, right? Where you have two siblings that are total opposites, yet the core of them is the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. So before we jump into last call, I feel like we've had so much to talk about that we didn't talk about this next question as much, but I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on it. So can you tell me kind of about either your awareness of how your awareness of the Michigan brewing community came to be, or maybe what do you draw from it? How would you describe the Michigan brewing community, whether that's the guild specifically or just the community at large, to somebody else, or what's important to you about it?
I think, the culture of craft beer and like sharing knowledge and being open and helping each other is so huge. And I remember in our early days, Kris coming from corporate America, would Herman Miller ever share anything with Steelcase? Or, if you look at, what are considered competitors, that's kind of out there. But, you look at the craft beer, the culture around craft beer is sharing, helping, and, so it's a nice industry to be in. So I think that to me is what kind of defines everything. And
it always has.
Yeah. And being someone that was at that first guild meeting in the little pub in Saginaw, planting that seed, I can remember, still feeling kind of competitive with the breweries that are around the table. And it was really like that first, those first early festivals to me that really like changed the dynamic for me of being, I want to outperform or be a better brewery than so-and-so. It really, all of a sudden we're working together, pulling off these festivals, and it was the owners and brewers working the tables, slugging the kegs, doing those types of things. But that effort together really, to me, as far as the guild goes, that was a game changer. And I think, that's probably why our guild is I think one of the strongest, because we got used to helping each other and looking out for each other, and realizing that we're not competing with, we have something else bigger to compete with than just ourselves. So
well, I think that's still true now, right? Like as you look at how his craft beer's audience changed and the growth and all of that, right? Slowing down and all these other things coming up in popularity, whether it's, the hard seltzers or distilleries or wineries. I think that same spirit that the guild was founded on so many years ago is just as, or even more important now, as our industry is maturing, and we need to, work together as all of these breweries, reminding our customer base why we're still relevant and why we are something for all of the people, and not just small segments of the population. I think that's like our next big challenge as a guild, or a community of breweries. But I think it's one we can be just as successful in as we were, introducing the world to the greatness of craft beer. I think we can continue building on that. We just have to make sure we're working together in the best way possible.
Yeah. I've always found too that if you pause for a minute and don't feel like, oh, it's difficult to keep doing those value-driven things under crisis, and instead think, actually drawing on those values are what get me through the crisis.
For sure.
That's a pivot that I think has profoundly affected me in my career. And I agree that, that experience coming out of Saginaw, out of the Hamilton Street pub, really helped change my perspective for the rest of my career. And that helps you draw on those things as part of your strength and resilience, instead of, oh, an extra thing I got to do.
Yeah.
It's a difference maker in terms of how you come through on the other side of a crisis, I think, as a community or an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for sharing that. So I'd love to jump into our last call questions. It's a series of questions we ask everybody that have done these interviews. With y'all here as a 2-person interview, I think you can pick and choose whether you each want to answer the question, both of you answer it, or whether you want to choose or whatever. It's a free for all. So you guys can do as you please. First question you've already alluded to a little bit is the pandemic. So how has COVID-19 and all the related regulations, how has it affected your business or really your industry outlook looking forward?
Whew.
It's a big one, I know.
Yeah.
So it gets lighter from here, but
Yeah. Drop the head.
I think talking to people in this time, it's just, reality is like, this is such an unprecedented time. It's really love to hear from you kind of from here and now, what's going on.
We're restaurant was a big part, our brew pub is a big part of our business, and, everything that we taught our people, go extra on service, find out ask questions, find out what people like, find them something they like, bring them something new, all these things that we've taught people over the years. All of a sudden, when we're open during COVID, okay, get their order, leave people alone, get out of their space quick, so we've had to change everything that, we had to change so much. And then, we're still serving people outside. I can't believe people are still sitting outside, but they are doing it, and we're there. But it's just changed so much, and financially, it doesn't make business sense anymore to be open. But we've kind of talked about, our goal right now is to keep people employed, and we try to hold everything up to that comparison. So everything we do under that, light, makes us make different decisions than we would otherwise. But, we're trying to keep people employed, trying to keep open, whether it makes sense or not, and trying to do all these things that we know we'll get on the other side of it at some point. But we're just trying to, keep as many people happy. And so I don't know, that's the approach we're taking, but it's not been a treat, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think, all the things about community building that breweries are naturally doing, right? I mean, that's all what had to be put on hold. Community tables, right? We have those 20-foot long tables where you sit with a random person. So obviously those are not in use. But I think, that time will come back, and it'll be, quite a party when we get to the other side of things. But I think the other thing I would just add is, through random conversations, me specifically, I've been connecting more with a group of, there's some restaurants, some distilleries, some breweries, and having that group as really, it's like group therapy where, we're sharing what's working and not working and what's frustrating, and, just really cheering each other on to get to the other side of this. Again, just points out the importance of having these networks that, you can rely on and can trust to help get through all of this together. That group, did form randomly, but ended up becoming the group that put out that Michigan restaurant promise back in June when the first shutdown ended. But what a cool thing, right? To see this group of random different companies coming together for the greater good and trying to push for innovation and for new things in a time of crisis where, I see a lot of people comment on like, oh, it's so cool to watch how creative all these restaurants and breweries are being, and they're so innovative, and wow, the pandemic really shows that side of it. And like, it's true, but it's also so exhausting to have to keep pivoting and keep reinventing, and that's such a challenging thing to be constantly going through and not knowing where the other side of it is. But it's easier to do, again, when you have a group of, friends that you can really rely on. So.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you. So the next one is called The More You Know. What beer styles do you feel most connected to, and what do you wish more people knew about it?
I still really, love those, kind of simple beers with, yeast character, the stuff we were founded on. I think they're really interesting. They're maybe not, like the flavor power punch beers that I think people are becoming accustomed to. And as like the highest ranked beers on these sites are, double, triple IPAs and big stouts, and, the subtleties are often lost. But I think as people's taste and their experience of beer goes on, you start appreciating, simple flavors, dryness, things like that are complementary to food. And so I wish people would, keep trying beers and I do think if you understand a little bit about how things are made and why they're made, it helps you taste differently. So those types of beers, I think that's what I wish people would taste would go back that way.
Yeah. Kris, you still loving the amber ales?
I don't really drink amber.
Fair enough.
I have this year, I did come to appreciate, as we started doing more lagers, to Jason's point, right? Like the nuances of these slightly different lagers that we did throughout the year. It's fun. It's fun to like go back to those more traditional things and try to find those different flavor profiles from things that may not seem that different.
Yeah. So your ideal home bar, I think with more and more people drinking and serving beer at home, especially through the pandemic, I wonder what your ideal home bar suggestions are like, either from your home bar or from an imagined one. What are the tips and tricks to serving beer at home?
I do really like glassware.
It's true, he does. We have a lot.
Kris made me thin out our collection a little bit. But I do think, it's something from that European experience of, being presented with a beer in a special glass. I think it creates that sense of experience beyond just anything else. So, I always, am selecting the proper glass for the beer I'm drinking, where, if we have in-laws or whatever, they'll come over and they'll be, why are you using my Belgian beer glass to put your rum and Coke in? No. So, but I think that's a good start. proper
Yeah.
glassware.
Yeah. All right. Love and hate. What current trends do you love or hate, and how are they reflected or not in your brewery?
I'm gonna say we're not big fans of the hard seltzer. May have alluded to that already.
Yeah, I understand why people are making them, but
Mhm.
and I'm seeing, people take a craft approach to it, but I still don't understand why they exist really.
I always thought a gin and tonic worked pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, did it need improvement?
It just doesn't, my mind doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's the thing I struggle with the most. And then I do, how do we get here to it? I think, craft breweries, by making seltzers, are aiding in their stickability in the market, because they've just given credibility to that whole section, where my preference would have been, we're beer makers, let's make beer, and then that stuff will go just like smearing off ice, just like Zima, it'll just go away someday. But it hasn't. It's here. We're fighting everything within us to resist playing in that, because I just have no passion, and I don't see much craft in that. So, but I'm also recognizing it's here to stay for longer than I would like. So I don't. That's the bane of my existence right now.
And on the love trends that you love side, sounds like the hazy IPAs and the pastry stouts have your attention. Anything else?
Well, I guess for me, it's just so interesting seeing just when you think you can count IPA out, it finds a new fold and goes somewhere else, which is crazy. But there are so many versions of it. It's just that hop exploration. I guess I'm still excited about that.
Yeah.
And
That's really fun.
yeah, so I keep track of that. I watch it. I'm experimenting, reading, trying other people's beers. So that's still exciting to me.
How about your first drink? This should probably be a both of you answer. If you remember your first alcoholic beverage.
Do you remember? I remember. Me and
My
my buddy Eddie Craven back, man, how old were we? 12?
Shout out to Eddie.
Sneaking my dad's warm Weedmans. And remember that beer, Fred?
Yeah.
Wiedemann's. I think it was like the cheapest beer ever, but it had probably been in my dad's garage, warm, cold for like years.
Yeah.
We snuck out of the house at night. Sorry, Mom. And went down to the park and like drank a couple warm Weedmans. And we hated every second of it, but we drank them anyway. And
that's good stuff.
Yeah, that was my first.
I think my first one I'm willing to talk about was Honey Brown. So back in college, when I didn't think I liked beer, I had a ska band that was playing in our town that stayed in my my then boyfriend's house, and convinced me I should drink this Honey Brown beer.
Wow, that's a rowdy first beer.
Yeah, there's a lot of memories attached to that, and they were a great band. So I forever will love ska.
There you go. How about your worst drink? Often correlation to first drink, but not always.
Peach schnapps.
Yeah. Peach schnapps.
Well, I remember, you have Chicago roots, so you
Yep.
aware of Malort.
Oh yeah.
So I remember, selling, going to Chicago, selling beer, and then going out with the Chicago crew, and then they order me a shot of this Malort. I had no idea what they're talking about, never heard of it, whatever. But I do notice that I'm the only one that has one of these. Like, they're not joining me.
Oh, that's not the way to do it. They should have to join you.
They're presenting it to me, and everyone's kind of standing back and looking at me.
Yeah.
And that I didn't know what to expect, and it was as terrible as.
That's a breach of etiquette, in my opinion. If you're ordering a Malort for somebody else, you're drinking one too, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I will say this is the first of its kind. It's the first back-to-back worst drink episode to episode we've had. So Isaac was on the last episode. Malort was his worst drink.
That was so funny.
So, your brother Isaac and you just created the first back-to-back worst drink episode.
See, now sales are going to go up a Malort. People are going to, okay.
I wish I had a Malort handy. I'd pour one and toast. All right, so we've added this one recently, and it's sometimes tricky, but story time. We'd love to hear what you guys consider a go-to funny story that you find coming up all the time from your time in the world of Michigan beer. It can be about you or somebody else, but something that just cracks you up over and over.
I don't know if it's a go-to story, but I couldn't help, I was thinking about this interview, and I was just thinking back to the old days, and back in those early festival days, I remember, soccer games would emerge after the festival.
Yeah, that's fun.
I remember we're all younger then, but those were fun, and I think it got a little competitive. So then, of course, we had an idea that okay, then we have to play with a beer in one hand, and that kind of knocked it back down to where it needed to be. But those were the days kicking a soccer ball with owners and brewers. That doesn't happen anymore, but that was a pretty special time.
Yeah, Greg Burke kind of spearheaded that, didn't he?
Yeah, he was always driving that.
Yeah, he'd be coming in full jersey, regalia, ready to go.
Yeah, but I think even Tim Surprise would be out there, and it's fun.
That's great.
Yeah,
Kris, you got any in the archives?
Yeah, my favorite this is back in the New Holland days when we'd go to the Madtown Festival every year.
Oh yeah.
That was just like a weekend that should be forgotten every year, right? And what stays or what happens there should stay there every year, which is why I think we stopped going, because we couldn't break that trend. So we just had to just stop. But my favorite was the year. So Jacob Derillo, who's our head brewer now, and was a brewer at New Holland at the time, he and some others left Madison to head back home, and they must have just been so hungover they forgot to pay attention and somehow ended up in Minnesota. So went 4 hours out of their way.
Yeah, they didn't notice for 3 hours in the opposite direction.
That's a pretty big zig when you should have zagged.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right. So last question. Who's a bucket list drinking companion? Somebody that you'd love to have a beer with, but you haven't, alive or dead?
Oh, I'm all over Barack Obama.
All right.
Love to have a beer with him.
Yeah, we meant to invite him to our broadleaf opening, but we forgot.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I'm sure he would have come.
I could
second really, that would have missed opportunity. You probably would have had it.
But I can just see you can see that guy's he's got some stories. If you could just loosen him up a little bit after years. Oh man, I'd love to hear him let loose.
Yeah, me too. You got another one, Jason, or are you guys a shared drinking companion experience with Barack? Yeah, that seems like a good party. So Barack, if you're listening, you gotta go to Vivant and have a beer with Jason and Kris, and loosen up a little. Anyways, thank you guys for doing all you do, for putting your beautiful company and beers and ideals into the world. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you spending time with me today. And I'm just proud and happy to be part of the community with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Fred.
Cheers. Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.
Let's drink Michigan beer.